the groups or movements they were a part of were in fact riding on Palestinian struggles as a tool to demonize Israel. Well, it's time to give these brave individuals the platform to share their story. I am proud to introduce our panelists, Rezwan Haq, Sebastian Para, Nadav Reed, and Abe Haq. Welcome to Columbia University, and let's begin with Rezwan.
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. My name is Rezwan Haq, and I'm a graduate from the University of Central Florida. Thank you to SSI for this opportunity, and to my friend Rudy Rockman for hosting us this evening. I'm honored to join this panel and share my story with so many passionate Americans vested in the interest of the only Jewish state. My story is of a journey through which I was completely transformed from an Israel basher to a defender of the only Jewish state in the world known as the State of Israel. I'm a Muslim, born and raised in Bangladesh, a tiny country located in southern Asia. As the economic conditions got worse, my parents understood that for a better life for their children, they needed the freedom and opportunity promised to them by these United States. For years, my father worked with the U.S. Embassy before his prayer for a better life was answered. Being rebellious became an early trait of mine, and I questioned everything. My mom nicknamed me La, which means no in Arabic. Now, as a young student in Bangladesh, I was taught about world history and the Second Great War, but never about the anti-Semitism in Europe that led to an unprecedented Holocaust. Imagine that. 6 million Jews were perished, yet not a single mention of when humanity showed their worst. And in 2006, I took my first steps here in the United States. Never shall I forget that first night in camp, which has turned my life into one long night. Through the words of Elie Wiesel, I learned about the horrific Holocaust. Now, my 9th grade year was filled with confusion. I wanted answers about this tragedy. My friends told me that my teachers were exaggerating, that their lessons were lies. And that's what I believed. Lies. Idealism is a powerful motivation, but it can also be dangerous when mixed with hate. Now, as an idealistic college student, I became an active member of a group at the University of Central Florida called Students for Justice of Palestine. This group became my life, and I became its outspoken leader. I once debated a member of a pro-Israel group on my college campus where I claimed that Israelis had blood on their hands. I accused the Jewish state of genocide while leading the BDS campaign, boycott, divestment, and sanction of the State of Israel. I led my organization to build the apartheid wall on my campus, where my hateful declaration condemned all IDF soldiers, both current and former, like my friend Rudy, as terrorists. Yet what happened next changed my life. I was approached by a student who participated in the experience presented by my apartheid wall. He listened to my story and understood all that I had to say. He paused and began to share his. He had been a lone soldier in the Israeli Defense Forces. In 2014, his best friend, another fellow lone soldier, died during the war with Hamas. I was moved by this revelation. We didn't debate. He wasn't trying to change my way of thinking. He simply shared with me his story, his pain, and his loss. And in those moments of personal exchanges, I saw the humanity in him. Now, that was the only time I had met this individual. It's quite difficult to run into the same person twice on a campus of 60,000 students, unless they're a person you're trying to actively avoid. Yet that interaction sparked something in me. I was no longer fueled by blind hatred. I had questions. I began to study, to read on a topic with deep roots on both sides. Now, as my questions were answered, I began to see Israel with different lens, with much deeper understanding. One conversation with an Israeli led to many more. One interaction led to mutual understanding, and a deep appreciation of the Jewish state. Now, in my search for truth, I had the privilege to travel to Israel. And in my conversations with locals, I found the truth in the saying that for every 2 Israelis, there are 3 opinions. And during my travel, I understood that Israel is a country that celebrates questioning, protects the naysayers, and encourages open debate and discourse. It is a country that, despite untold threats and dangers mounted at every corner, still fosters friendship. And I'll forever be grateful for the Jewish state for welcoming me to their home. So that's my story of how I transitioned to be a supporter of the Jewish state. And to reflect on my past, I do believe that a lot of the narrative pushed by organizations like SJP are divisive. However, I don't believe the students that take part in these organizations are bad students. Like me, these students are idealistic, or misguided and brainwashed by an organization to push a certain narrative. Now, I'm well aware of the demonization and harassment faced by Jewish students on this college campus. The work SSI have done to defend Israel on this campus is truly inspiring. It is important work that proves to the detractors that we are not alone, nor are we afraid. Now, I can sit here and badname SJP, but that goes against the principles echoed by our former First Lady of when they go low, we go high. Instead, I'd like to touch on the moral imbalance between Israel and her enemies. Now, SJP loves to push this narrative that Israel is evil, fascist, and everything bad, all wrapped into one. Now, it's an important narrative pushed by SJP because it immediately corners you into a box. You are either with them, or you're on the side of the oppressor. Now, this narrative is crafted in a way to trigger an emotional response, and that's why they target idealistic, liberal-minded college students. Yet their narrative actually falls apart when you study the moral imbalance between Israel and her enemies, especially on the topic of human shields. Now, there's absolute proof that Hamas uses human shields. They shoot their rockets from residential homes, hospitals, mosques, and UN-sponsored schools. Hamas knows that the use of human shields works as a deterrence against Israel. Now, if Israel destroys these launch pads and in result kills Palestinian civilians, Hamas knows that Israel will be charged guilty in the court of public opinion. Yet ask yourself this: what if the roles were reversed? What if it was Israel that used human shields? That wouldn't deter Hamas, nor any terrorists, because their main objective is to kill Israelis, even if it's women and children. This is where the SJP narrative falls apart. If Israel were an evil state, then why are they deterred by human shields? And it's because there is a moral difference between Israel and our enemies. It's because the IDF, even though they may not be perfect, operates under a strict moral standard that works to limit civilian casualties while fighting against enemies with genocidal intentions against the Jewish state. Now, with the remainder of my time, I'd like to briefly share my thoughts on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Now, I understand that the aspiration of a Jewish state came from unshackling the chains of persecution. Throughout the world, Jewish communities were persecuted, and anti-Semitism in Europe brought upon the darkest times in our history. In Nazi Germany, it started with discrimination, which led to boycotts and ended with murder. So when Arab leaders threatened Israel with boycotts and destruction, it evokes painful memories in the minds of Israelis while preventing any meaningful dialogue for peace. Now, on the other hand, it is irrefutable that Palestinians, both Muslims and Christians, have suffered under the conditions of an occupation. The pain of displacement has forced Palestinians to live in refugee camps as they yearn for return to their home. Palestinians living in the West Bank are forced to go through the humiliation of checkpoints, random searches and seizures at any time or anywhere, and being barred from the use of roads and neighborhoods designated for Israeli settlements. Simply put, the situation faced by the Palestinian people cannot be justified. And it is not fair for groups like SJP to exploit their suffering. I do believe that the Palestinians have a legitimate aspiration for dignity, freedom, and a state of their own. But the conversation needs to be honest, and that's where it starts. For too long, the two sides have been at an unfortunate stalemate. I know it's easy to point the blame to the other side. For Palestinians to point at the founding of the Jewish state that led to their Nakba, their catastrophe. For Israelis to point at the senseless violence at their borders and the constant barrage of missiles launched by Hamas in Gaza. Mohandas Gandhi once said that an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. If we only look at this conflict from one side or the other, we blind ourselves to the truth. The truth is, you can advocate for the Palestinian right of self-determination while be against the destruction of the only Jewish state in the world. You can be both pro-Israeli and pro-Palestinian. The two sides are not mutually exclusive, nor should they ever be. I do believe that peace is possible when the dreams of both sides are met through two states, where Israelis and Palestinians each live in security and harmony. The hunger felt by Palestinians for a state of their own cannot be fulfilled when they consume from the plate of hatred. Palestinian leaders must abandon violence. Moral authority will never be achieved through bus bombings, launching rockets at cities, and stabbing civilians. Take it from my people. My people were once ruled by the British. My people were beaten, lashed, and the exploitation of our resources contributed to the British industrialization. Yet, it was Mohandas Gandhi who preached nonviolence that won us our freedom. Messages of nonviolence and peace were shared by people from South Asia to South Africa. That message was shared here in the United States by Dr. King, who had a dream to take his people to the mountaintop. Now, all these events are testament to the fact that violence is not the answer, and that true peace can be achieved by preaching nonviolence and coexistence. Now, on the other hand, you can criticize the construction of Israeli settlements, which is a policy disagreement, while being in support of the Jewish state. Too often, the construction of these settlements cut through Palestinian land. This results in an increased presence of IDF soldiers for security that gives Palestinians a constant reminder of an existing occupation. The continuation of these settlements not only violate past agreements, but they undermine the peace process. Palestinians should be able to live in a society where they have the capabilities to work and build for their own people. Economic progress of the Palestinians is vital to the peace process. Now, whatever your opinion may be, we must have a vested interest in peace. We must live in ways that shows that we have learned from our past. We must cultivate a habit of empathy, recognize ourselves in one another, and make a common cause with the stranger. Now, all of us have a moral obligation to work for the day when Palestinian and Israeli mothers can raise their children without fear. A day when all of the children of Abraham can live peacefully and mingle in harmony. Toda Rabah. Thank you.
All right. So, I like to stand up. I'm a little different from you. I was raised. This comes out, right? All right. Are we on here? Yes. All right. So I was raised an evangelical Christian, and I preach on my church every week. So this is how I like to talk, because I'm a preacher guy. So sorry to get preachy on you. I'm just here to share my story. My name is Sebastian. I'm from Colombia. Colombia, not Colombia. I feel intimidated because you guys have an amazing story, and I know your story too. And I'm just here to share my story. And my personal story is, honestly, if I can be honest with you, it's a story of ignorance, of a person who just did not know any better and never cared to research, never cared to look farther than the cliches and the things you hear around. And I fell a victim to confirmation bias and to, you know, the main narrative that you hear on campus. And like, I wrote an article once saying that I was like a Boy Scout looking for merit badges to put on my sash. Because that's how a lot of social justice warriors people are today. We're looking for causes to take a stance on so we can put it on ourselves and wear it as signs of our you know, benevolence and our self-righteousness. And I care about fracking, I care about the Koch brothers, I care about Israel. And, you know, you just have them there, but you don't know anything about them deeply. And I didn't know anything about many of the things that I chose to take a stance on. So before we go into that, I'd like to take it back to my country. I'm from Colombia. You know, between Venezuela and Ecuador, very liberal countries who harbor communist guerrillas, terrorists, who every now and then we invade them, they invade us, it happens. Last year we just signed a peace treaty. After 50 years, the longest civil war in history of the world just ended last year with a peace treaty that an Israeli helped broker for us. Tal Becker is his name. He helped us broker peace, and we ended the war after 50 years with this communist terrorist in my country. These are the groups. They're called FARC, LN, and these are all of them. There's many of them. My father and my mom were involved in politics, and I was born in this little town, Trujillo, very violent town. When I was born, the 4 years around my birth, there were like 300 people who died, you know, with chainsaws thrown in the river, stuff like that. So I grew up in a particularly very violent place of Colombia, and I saw terrorism almost weekly. I saw buses being blown, the guerrilla raids will come. When I was in 5th grade, they taught us what to do if the communist terrorists came to raid our town. Imagine you being in 5th grade and they're telling you, if they come, duck and cover, and that's all you can do, right? Because the terrorists are coming to kill you. And I saw my grandpa was killed by these people, many of my family members. Many of my family members were threatened by them, extortioned by them, blackmailed, and eventually we just had to come to America. This is my beautiful family. This is when I graduated. This is when I was student body president of Georgia State University. I was the first Latino to get that position in 100 years of the school's history, and student body president of 60,000 students, you know, hotshot on campus, right? So throughout this time, when I came to America, my parents were very conservative, obviously, we're Christians, and when I came here, I became the opposite. I became very liberal. I became very involved in liberal causes, because out of the sudden, I was not part of the elite in Colombia. I was not part of the privileged people anymore. I was just an immigrant. My parents went from being computer engineers and accountants to working at a factory. They don't speak English, they're still working at the factory. And so I saw myself differently. I started seeing myself as a victim, as somebody part of the oppressed, right? Trying to fight for justice, to liberate ourselves, liberation theology, the whole thing. So I was very involved in things like undocumented rights. I was the leader of undocumented people's rights on my campus. I wrote a bill and I got many student government presidents to sign it, because Georgia was the only state in the entire country that didn't allow documented people to have in-state tuition. Although they had driver's licenses, social security numbers, they paid taxes, they were completely lawfully present, they still couldn't get in-state tuition. So that was something that we fought against in Georgia. Obviously, this is something that I care about too. Just very involved in these things. And I also worked for this particular party that I do not associate with anymore. And I worked for them for 2 years. Just very involved. This is when I received an award by the Martin Luther King family in Georgia. They're based there, and okay, you know, he did a lot of his work there. And I received an award called the Humanitarians Award for representing the values of Martin Luther King. So this just shows you how much of a social justice warrior I was in my community. Just very involved, all causes. I took a stance on everything. I was that annoying kid who cared too much about everything. And part of that was Israel, because Israel is the most evil thing in the world in that community. You know, it's just the poster boy for everything that's wrong in the world. And sometimes people don't even question why. Why do we have this predisposition towards hating Israel? Because that was my case. In my church, I was taught to love Israel in the Bible. But my pastor, many times they said very anti-Semitic things from the pulpit. Like, you know, there's a whole school of thought in Christianity that Jesus was a Palestinian. And I always thought that Jesus was a Palestinian. And we're just like, yeah, Jesus was a Palestinian. You see Jesus was like a fee and the whole thing. Like, how stupid is that, you know? Jesus could not have been a Palestinian because Palestine wasn't a thing when Jesus was around. The name Palestine came 300 years after Jesus was crucified. The name Palestine came with the Roman emperor who conquered Judea, the land of the Jews, and conquered the land. Jesus was a Judean, right? And they conquered his land, and they changed the name from Judea to Syria, Palestina, in honor of the ancient enemies of the Israelis, the Philistines. And there are many Palestinian officials today who are either liars or crazy who say that they're the Philistines. The Philistines were Greek people, seafaring people who settled down in Gaza. They were not Arabs like many Palestinians are today. So I didn't know that, but when I started studying, I was able to change my mind. Because the name Palestine, today people just call Israel, the pastors in my church still do that, like, oh, Jesus was from Palestine, and it just boils my blood. Because he could have not been, because like I said, the name Palestine came out 300 years after Jesus died. So I was invited to go to Israel. As a student body president, I got an invitation to go. And first I said, no way, why would I do that, right? Why would I go to this evil place? But then I thought, let's go. I want to see the apartheid. I want to go see the occupation. I want to go see these horrible things people are talking about, the apartheid wall, take selfies, Snapchat it up, and then just it's great for politics. I'm going to come back. That's going to be my law school statement, apply to law school using that trip to Israel. It's going to be great for politics. And when I got there, it took about 2 days for me to change my mind completely. For me to see that I had been lied to my whole life, that I lied to myself, thinking erroneous things about the land of Israel. And this is where we started. We started in the south. Who knows what this is? This is the gravestone of Ben Gurion, the first prime minister of Israel. And we started down in the south in the desert because we wanted to learn about what Zionism is. Zionism was a horrible war for me. It was a dirty war. The Zionist army, right? It sounds really dirty. But they taught it, we learned there from not white European Jews, from Mizrahi Jews, people who came from Iran, who were kicked out of Yemen, who were kicked out of Morocco, Tunisia, of Egypt. So these Jews who came from Arab lands, and they had to come to the only place they could go, to Israel, their ancient homeland. And they told, I realized that Zionism was the self-determination of the indigenous people of Israel, that they have a right to live in their homeland. Today, we talked about a lot of occupation, right? Israel is occupying Palestinian land. So we need to ask ourselves, what was before Israel? Before 1948, what was there? The British Mandate for Palestine. Before the British Mandate for Palestine, what was there? The Ottomans. And then you go back, right, to the Romans, and the Greeks, and the Babylonians, and the Assyrians, and you have to go back to this Jewish state that was established twice, as we know in history. So the only state that has been in this land is the Jewish state. No other state has been established there. Nobody else claimed Jerusalem as their capital, ever. The capital of these empires was always Damascus, Cairo, Medina, Mecca, something else, but never Jerusalem. Out of the sun, we care so much about Jerusalem, right? So this is another stuff we started learning there from people who were teaching us about the history of their families. We went down to Zerot, city in the south of Israel. This is like a museum of rockets that Hamas launched from Gaza. And here, for the first time, I was able to see Israelis as victims. The whole time, I thought Israelis would be oppressors. I started school at Montclair State University in New Jersey for 2 years. And a Jewish professor in my interpolitical thought class, he told me, the way the FARC, the terrorist communist people, treat your people in Colombia is the way Israelis treat Palestinians. And I started to believe those things. So I started to believe that Israelis were terrorists. But here I saw that it's not the case. They're being constantly bombed. And these rockets, by the way, they're not meant to kill people. If they want to kill people, they use missiles, not rockets. A rocket is not accurate. They just want to make your life impossible. And these rockets are launched at what time? 7 to 9 a.m., 4 to 7 p.m. When people are out, when they're taking their kids to school, I think like 95% of the people here have post-traumatic stress disorder. And they just want to make your life impossible. And these people don't leave these towns because this is their homeland. This is where they want to live. Because for centuries, 1900 years, they're dispossessed of their homeland. And they lived oppressed wherever they went. And finally, they were able to return to their homeland. And that's where they want to live. Even if Hamas is making it impossible for them to live there. So he was showing us what kids were writing in this town, what drawings, just, rockets falling in their homes, violent stuff. And this is what these kids were used to see. Then we went to a Palestinian camp, refugee camp. And this has changed my mind because I came to America as a refugee too. I got asylum here. And the whole time you hear about Palestinian refugees, like, who are they? Why is it that Palestinian refugee can be inherited? It's the only people in the world who are able to inherit the status of refugee until the third and the fourth and the fifth generation. Why? Why is there one United Nations agency, the only United Nations agency who has never provided a solution to the problem? Because they perpetuate, is that the word? To this problem, because it's business for them. If you look at the staff that the UN, the UNRWA has to treat Palestinian refugees, it's huge staff compared to the little staff that's treating actual refugees from Syria. My country has the highest number of internally displaced people in the world, Colombia. Colombia has 7 million internally displaced people, more than Iraq, more than Syria. Where are students for justice in Colombia? Where are they asking for my freedom? Colombia gets the most money out of the Middle East, $500 million every year from the United States. Where are they protesting against Colombia? And it's corrupt. 7 generals of the last president of Colombia got indicted and they went to jail for killing innocent farmers, dressing them up as rebels to show American results. These are called false positives. Where are students for justice in Colombia? So this is what I started to see, the hypocrisy of these groups who seem to care about all human rights, but they're anti-Semitically focused on only one country, Israel. So we went to the security wall, or the apartheid wall, as I like to call it, and we learned that for 4 years in the Second Intifada, Palestinian terrorists could just freely walk into Israel and commit terror attacks. Mind you, terror attacks don't differentiate between Arabs and Muslims, Christians and Jews. They kill everybody. They just blow up in this barra, restaurant, a bus. They kill everybody. And when Israel put up the security barrier, terrorist attacks went down by 95%. And we met with the guy who built it, and he showed us how it was built when it can be removed. Nobody wants the wall. And this is something that I felt trapped to in my campus. They did this campaign from Mexico to Palestine, and they came to me as the president of the Latino Club, asking me to support this Mexico to Palestine BS. It's not the same. And that's something else that I learned in my process, that our struggles are not connected. My struggle is not connected to your struggle, okay? This thing that Martin Luther King said, that threat to justice somewhere is a threat to justice everywhere, I don't believe in that. Because the people, the oppressor, the people in Nepal, the people of South Africa, the people of Colombia, are very different from the situation in Israel or Palestinians or Mexico. The wall that we have with Mexico has nothing to do with this wall that's meant to stop terrorists and to save lives in Israel. It's not the same. So don't come lying to me, telling me that our struggles are the same, that we need to fight the man, fight the power. We're not the same. And that's where I was able to, thank God, able to wake up and see that these people don't care about my causes. They just want to tokenize me and use me for their hateful. Because they don't care about Palestine. They don't care about establishing a Palestinian state. They care about destroying Israel. Because if we were to successfully accomplish everything that these groups want to do, you will not have a Palestinian state. If you want to boycott Israel, sanction Israel, you want to divest from Israel, no country will do business with Israel ever. All the United Nations, UNESCO, they'll all sanction Israel. If nobody will ever go to Israel again, you still will not have a Palestinian state. Palestinian kids will still be victims to Hamas terror camps in Gaza. So be serious about your purposes. Because to destroy Israel is not to build Palestine. And that's where I started to see where the lies fell apart. This guy's from Venezuela. He made Aliyah. He went to Israel because in Venezuela, if anti-Semitic, he couldn't be there anymore. And he was in charge of COGAT. COGAT is a unit of the army, completely dedicated to helping Palestinian people, giving them humanitarian aid. You always hear that in the Gaza crossing that Israel does not let humanitarian aid to Israel. That's not true. They let tons of aid in. And sometimes they had terrorist things to make weapons in this humanitarian aid. Egypt has blocked their passage many times. Where are students against Egypt? I don't know. So that really blew me away to see that the Israeli army had a whole unit dedicated to helping Palestinian people receive food, water, electricity, and for them to receive humanitarian aid. Am I short on time? Can you tell me? All right, cool. This is something that also impressed me, but I'll tell you if we have time. This is a journalist. You know what? No, it's pretty important. This guy, Mohammed Zohadi. He's a Muslim friend of ours, an Arab Israeli, and he's somebody who stood up against his own people's incitement against him because he stood up for Israel. He said, Israel is my country, I was born here, he's a Zionist, he's serving in the army right now. And to me, that was really mind-blowing because what these groups tell you in Israel Apartheid Week is that Israel's an apartheid state, horribly diminishing the suffering of the South African people who actually went through apartheid. And they're saying these things trying to make you believe that Israel has a legal system where, I guess, white European Jews are completely different from the rest of the people there, from Mizrahi Jews or from Palestinians or from Muslims or from Arabs. And that's not true. Legally, all Israeli citizens have the same rights on paper. Is there discrimination in Israel? Of course. There's discrimination here, there's discrimination in my country, there's discrimination everywhere. So if you're going to pick on one country in Israel, you have to pick on all of them, or else you're anti-Semitic. It's as simple as that. You cannot pick just one country, because there are problems in every country of the world. So his story really blew me away, because his aunt is actually a member of the Knesset, and she's very anti-Israel. And so think about that. Israel's an apartheid country, but an anti-Israel Arab woman is on the parliament. And she constantly tries to destroy Israel in, legislatively speaking, and she's still there. So how can you be Israel apartheid state when it's a parliament member completely dedicated to destroying the state of Israel? And like her, there's over 12 one of them. So you explain the apartheid system to me. Of course, we have fun, we party it up, we have a lot of fun in Israel, because I'm Latino and we like to party. And at the end, I got this superlative, most likely to move to Israel. When I came back, SJP was not happy about this. They said that I was racist, that I supported genocide, that I was Islamophobic, because I tweeted against terrorism. Fall of 2015, there was a lot of stabbing, mini intifada, as they call it, and this group of people put out a letter, a campaign trying to impeach me, trying to get rid of me, because they couldn't handle, it was bad PR for them. They're doing a bunch of lies on campus to chalk the occupation, the apartheid wall from Mexico, like the same old lies that they're always saying. And here I was, the student body president, tweeting in favor of Israel, showing how progressive Israel, how awesome, how free, bringing Israeli speakers to campus. And thank God I had the support of the pro-Israel community around me who helped me, because I knew I was right. I knew Israel was not an apartheid state, because I've been there. Most of the kids on these groups, they've never been to Israel. They're not even Palestinian. They have adopted a cause that doesn't belong to them. They just, I don't know why, we just care about causes that we don't understand. And they do all these things, but they don't really understand about it. And if you ask Palestinians looking for jobs in Ramallah or something, they'll probably be like, stop what you're doing. I need a job. I need to feed my kids. And that's why some people in the West Bank, they take up terrorism. Because if they don't have a job, because these boycott companies, organizations don't want Israel to give them jobs or to engage, what do? They go and kill an Israeli. Because if they go to jail, the Palestinian government will give them a salary, up to like $3,200 a month. That's a great salary. I don't get paid that, and I went to college. So if you don't have a job in the West Bank, you can go and commit a terror attack, you go to jail. The Palestinian Authority has it in their budget to pay terrorists. And so you tell me where's their peace for partner? Israel has offered peace at least 6 to 7 times. They're having 6 to 7 opportunities to have 2 states for 2 people, but they have always rejected it. Palestinian politicians have always rejected these offerings. I guess this is my closing words. My personal view of Israel, of the 2-state solution or whatever, I'm no one to tell Israelis what to do with the country, okay? If Israelis, I would love to have a 2-state solution where 2 people are happy, everybody get along, but that's not my position to say that. Because I don't live in Israel. And neither any of us, I think. So why do you have an opinion about something that does not affect your life daily? The land of Israel belongs to them. Judea and Samaria, the historical homeland of the Jewish people, belongs to them. We're nobody to tell them whether or not to give up their homeland. If Israelis choose to give up their homeland to create a Palestinian state, amazing. But I'm never going to tell them to do that. That's just my particular opinion. I'm not a legal expert, so I choose not to speak about settlements because I don't know about that. But today, I'm very happy that Israel changed my mind and allowed me to see that things are not as they seem, and that there's a lot of groups there who want to seem grassroots, but they're not grassroots. They have millions of dollars, millions of oil money behind them, and they bring in terrorists to campus. And I was in Chicago last year working, and they brought Rasmea Odeh, a terrorist, a convicted terrorist, who was responsible for killing people, and they brought her to campus to speak. As a Colombian, I was disgusted by that. Imagine if they brought Osama bin Laden to campus to speak. Nobody would be okay with that. Imagine if they brought an ISIS member to campus. They would not be okay with that. If they brought a FARC member to my campus to speak, I'll be protesting that. I'll sue, I'll get naked or stuff. I don't know what I do. Like, why are we allowing these people to bring terrorists to campus? That's crazy. But, you guys know the politics behind it. All right, I think I spoke too much. Thank you so much for your time.
So my name is Reed. I was raised by revolutionary socialists. I was anti-Israel up until maybe 5 or 6 years ago. My parents were part of IWK, which was aligned and, I guess, the Black Panther Party closely went to minority communities and kind of inspired minority communities to take up arms. And so my parents were part of IWK. They were friends with people in the Black Panther Party, the Young Lords in Chicago, which is a Puerto Rican independence movement. They were also part of the League of Revolutionary Struggle, which was a Marxist-Leninist organization. I was raised in this intentional community where, they had kind of silly rules because couples were only able to have 1 kid per year. So like one couple had a kid 1 year, and then they went down the list and every couple got a term. And so I was essentially raised by this community of socialists. There were also Jewish Bundists and who were part of the community. Bundism was a secular Jewish socialist movement, and they were highly hostile to Zionism. And so I was raised thinking Zionism is fascism. And that was it. It wasn't until 5 or 6 years ago I started dating a guy. He happened to be a Jewish Israeli, and part of our dynamic was we would have lively debates as or whatever. So we talked about different issues like politics, religion, and of course the topic of Israel came up. And he asked questions that challenged my beliefs. So he asked, are the Jewish people, do they qualify as a nation of people? And I was like, of course. A nation of people are anybody with a collective identity, with a shared heritage, linguistics, religion. Yeah. He says, do all people deserve the right to self-determination? Of course. So why are you opposed to Zionism if you support the self-determination of all people? Do the Jewish people, are they excluded? I didn't really have an answer to that because, of course, I didn't want to say no. But then, why was I opposed to Zionism? I didn't have an answer other than the fact that that's what I was told. Zionism is fascism. So I decided to do some research because the most I knew was Zionism is fascism. And as I studied history of the region, my opinions started to change. I now no longer see Zionism as fascism. I probably liked the pre-state of Israel, like how labor Zionism was, since they were very socialist. They had, didn't know about that at the time, you know, when I was an anti-Zionist. I didn't know that Zionism could also be socialist. And so that kind of blew my mind. And so, yeah. So now I don't believe one group of people have the right to self-determination that overrides another group. So I do think that there needs to be some sort of compromise between Zionism and Palestinian nationalism. And I'm not really an expert in terms of what should happen. I just know that in order for peace to occur, coexistence and reconciliation needs to occur. And that's all I push for, is that.
Hi, my name is Abe Hawk. I'm an academic program developer, an adjunct faculty member at New York University. I was born in Jordan to Arab Muslim parents, both of whom were born in mandatory Palestine. My mother's family fled, became refugees in 1948. My father's family did not, but they currently live, or the village from where he is, where he was born, is in Area B. I grew up in Jordan and was raised like any or most Muslim Arab children, immersed in the hatred of Israel and in grotesque forms of anti-Semitism, and remained in that state, I guess, until I came to the United States as a teenager. Very shortly after I arrived here, I met my first challenge to this uniform view about Israel and the Jews in general. I was invited the very first Christmas I was here to a friend's house in Chicago. I was in Cambridge, Massachusetts at the time. He invited me to spend the holidays with him. So I went there, and we went to the University of Chicago campus, I remember. And it was empty because it was holidays. The only place that was open was the library. So we went there, and the only person in the library turned out to be an Israeli graduate student. I still remember her name. We had a little awkward conversation, polite, but awkward, at the end of which I said something like, we might have peace in the region if the stolen land is returned to its people, something like that. She said, there was no stolen land, and she posed a question for me in a factual way that started me on my journey. That journey is the end. Where I am now, it is in fact remarkable, but the process of how it happened is not remarkable. So I said to her, what do you mean, no stolen land? What are all these people? Where did they come from? What land, where did they live, She said, if you can find me a single instance of Jews kicking Arabs off their land before the outbreak of hostilities in late November 1947, then write to me, and we'll have a different conversation. She meant write like, actually with pen and paper, because it was not computers at the time. So I thought of myself as a young intellectual, and so I thought, I'm going to pursue this. So I went back and looked at standard histories and tried to skim through them to find instances of precisely that. Jews expelling or forcing Arabs off their land before the outbreak of the war. Once the war happened, things changed, of course. All bets are off. But I was raised, this was a pillar of the Palestinian or the Arab narrative. You know, that these European interlopers came with the Bible in one hand and a machine gun in the other and kicked off the poor fallaheen off their land, the Arabs. It's not a minor detail. That is the central tenet in the entire, in the education that I received about the conflict. So after I looked at a couple of standard histories, I couldn't find it. So I reached out to sympathetic professors, and they confirmed my initial, idea or notion that there was expulsion, but they could not provide me with very specifics. I remember making an international phone call. It was very difficult at the time. We had to pay, ahead of time and all of that, to ask an uncle of mine about that, and he also confirmed, but he could not provide me with specific instances of a single instance of Jews kicking Arabs off their land. So I turned to Arab sources, and I remember reading a 2-volume work by a man named Arif al-Arif, who is actually, he's the one who coined the term al-Nakba. He wrote that work in 1954, so it's very close to the events. Yeah, very early. And I spent maybe 8 months reading these 2 volumes of the same work. It is very detailed, and the reason I searched because I know he lists the names of all the Arab dead in the war, in Israel's war of independence, or in Nakba. And he lists villages that had been, emptied and things like that. So I thought, whatever it is, I'll find it there. What I found was not what I was seeking, but something even more shocking. The first thing is, in the entire book, he does not mention the word Palestinian once. This is a 2-volume book. No Palestinians. How come? So that's the first one. The second thing is that I found that I couldn't find instances of Jews kicking Arabs off their land, but he lists several times as, examples of achievements of the Arab resistance, where Arabs kicked Jews off their land. And he mentions land that was purchased and paid for by Jews, settled and farmed, and then the Arabs actually harassed them and shot at them and terrorized them until they moved out. He, I think, mentions 3 or 4 instances of that. And so that was really shocking to me. And I went through stages of what, the Kubler-Ross 5 stages of grief thing, where shock and, denial and then, resignation but I started reading more and more about it, and over a long period of time, I discovered all manner of things that, as I said, debunked a great deal of the education I received about the conflict. When I found out about that initial question, initial challenge, I asked myself, if this central tenet is false, what else is false? And that's what started me rolling. Then I started reading, I started reading Israeli sources. And the resignation and initial distaste started being replaced with admiration for this plucky little country that achieved so much in such a little period of time. Finally, and over a very long period of time, this admiration turned into really what can only be termed love for the state of Israel. All of all this happened in secret. I didn't share this with my family, with my friends. It was nothing dramatic about it. There was no epiphanies or no, where I met someone, there are stories where you read a book and you visit Israel and you change your mind, or people ask me if I had a Jewish girlfriend, or if, there's no Jewish doctor saving my life or anything like that. It was very gradual, sometimes tedious. Hundreds of hours of working through details, sometimes quite painful details about the conflict. Deir Yassin, Qidmiya. I attacked these most difficult issues in the conflict, each one taking months and sometimes years, dealing with the details and reading sources in different languages. And each time I dug in and researched, the deeper I dug, the cleaner Israel came out, which was a remarkable thing. Usually when you dig deeper, you find more dirt. And I dug deeper in these historical instances. My esteem and understanding of Israel increased. So I kept this to myself. As I said, it was a pretty private thing. I shared it with my wife and a couple of other people. And I thought of myself as a private person. I never was going to get involved in politics or say anything about this until I got an appointment as a professor in Japan in 2003, lasted to 2006. And I came back, I was shocked by what I saw on the NYU campus. What has happened, or had happened in the meantime, was, of course, the BDS movement was launched. Couldn't cross Washington Square Park without seeing tables with Israeli flag and swastikas on them. And members of the student body and the faculty, shocked me with how aggressive their attitude had become towards Israel. Of course, nobody suspected that someone with my background would have any different opinion about Israel. So, unsolicited, they would come up to me and tell me about how horrible Israel is, or thinking that they have a sympathetic audience to their views in me. And then, sometimes after like a faculty party or something like that, after the second or third drink, the anti-Zionism would very, very easily slip into grotesque anti-Semitism very quickly. It started with the Zionists and the Israelis, it ended up with the Jews. So I decided to become engaged, but I wanted to do it from behind the scenes. I didn't want my name to be out there. I have still family both in Jordan and in the West Bank, or in Yehuda Shomron, and I was a coward. Did not want to really jump to the fray. So I wrote pseudonymously in newspapers and blogs. I volunteered certain services, for education, to educate certain, high school students. And then around, I think, 2012, 2013, I decided to speak out and show my face, and I'm doing that now increasingly increasingly speaking around in the United States, both in the United States and abroad, but I don't know, college campuses, at churches, and writing blogs for the Jerusalem Post and also some academic papers at the Begin Sadat Center. The main element in this journey is a quest for the truth. It is not changing sides for me at all. I'm still rooted in my background. I still understand the suffering of the Arabs. I was raised to identify as a Palestinian, although now I believe this is this issue needs to be resolved, that the people on both sides of the Jordan are really one people, and it needs to be resolved in the context of an arrangement with Jordan. It's impossible to separate the Arabs on, just like it would be impossible to separate the Arabs on both sides of the Euphrates or on both sides of the Nile. There's really one people. The Jordan River is not a natural boundary, it's a natural meeting place. Very much, as I said, like the Nile and the Euphrates. So I'm going to stop here, and always the best part of a dialogue like this usually comes out when the questions are asked. I want you to ask the hardest questions. I want you to ask questions about facts in the conflict, even if you are sympathetic to Israel. I know many Jews and many Israel supporters, because of the limit that time places on their understanding of the conflict, are not, maybe sometimes they're not comfortable with certain periods of Israeli history. As I mentioned Deir Yassin, I mentioned the very real Arab, Palestinian suffering or Arab suffering in the camps, the scattering, the stigma of refugee living, all of that stuff. Please feel free. I will not feel. I will not regard your question as hostile, no matter how pointed or difficult you find it to be. And I hope I'll be able to answer it. Thank you very much.
You guys, it was quite an amazing event. We're going to be passing around microphones. Of course, we trust that you use your time to ask a question. I can signal the people in the back to cut off the microphones if someone starts yelling. That's happened in the past. So we trust you guys that you will keep it to a question, hopefully 30 seconds, and really be able to engage with these amazing speakers and their experiences. So please raise your hands if you have a question.
What made you, all of you, want to speak out? Because you're speaking out to a cause that's not really yours, and you don't have to speak out. So I'm just wondering what makes you want to speak out, and also, since you were in a society or an organization that was against Israel, what's the feedback that you get from them now?
I'll begin by disagreeing that it is our cause. It's our cause as human beings, and it is our cause as Americans. As human beings, I think the best defense of Israel, the best explanation of its position and of its moral stature can be made not by Jews, not with reference to claims of ethnic or otherwise, but on the basis of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. as Americans, this particular threat, that we call BDS movement, is really not a threat to Israel. I mean, Israel has faced graver and more and bigger challenges than anything the BDS crowd can come up with. But BDS movement and the demonization of Israel presents a threat to our country, and especially on campuses, because it normalizes a form of racism. And I think anti-Semitism is clearly a form of racism. It is the discrimination and demonization of a group of people, the Jews, and the denial of their right to self-determination out of all the nations of the earth. So I think it is our cause, and we are probably, maybe better at it than, some of the Jews or the Israelis that I've met, because we cannot be accused or, dismissed as tribalists who are just siding with our tribe or with our people. So that's what I think.
Well, I have to be convinced into speaking, but I thought that perhaps my story of not really knowing anything about the history and just buying into taglines and buzzwords might help other people kind of question where their opinions come from, how they're formed, and also whether or not they can be changed. So I'm not a big fan of the Israeli government. In fact, there's very little that I agree with them on. But that doesn't mean that the Jewish people don't deserve the right to self-determination. So if I would speak up for Tibetans, why wouldn't I speak up for Israelis and Palestinians?
And most Israelis don't like the government, so.
Yeah, well, yeah.
That's a joke. What makes me speak up? Two things, and I am going to get tribalist. I just, one is my religion. I'll leave that for later. But first is I keep seeing Latinos falling victims to these groups who are targeting them to tokenize us and to make us part of their hateful movement. Anti-Zionism is racism. There is no group against the independence of South Sudan or Catalonia or Tibet or whatever. Like, there's only groups against the independent or like the self-determination of the Jewish people, and that's anti-Semitism. So I don't want to keep seeing my people who somehow there's this this post-colonial guilt that America invaded Iraq and Afghanistan, so I guess we have to feel good or bad for our Palestinian brothers and sisters. And no, don't be so weak academically like I was, intellectually, and actually study the facts. This is not our fight. Don't let them use you for the hateful purposes. Because anti-Zionism, anti-Jewish sentiments did not start in 1948. There were massacres in 1922, and in Spain in 1492, and the pogroms in Russia and Nazi Germany. They don't hate Israel they don't hate the Jews because of Israel. They hate Israel because of the Jews. And my second thing about my religion, that's not mine, I heard it in a conference one day. The second one is my faith. I happen to be a Christian who believes that I will go to heaven. And when I go to heaven, I'm not going to be Colombian or Hispanic. I'm going to be a son of God. And I just happen to believe that this is the land of God, the people of God, and that makes me speak up as a religious duty I want to do. And you said something about feedback? Is that what was that question?
What is the feedback that you get
From my
patriots who you used to, or I don't know if you still are associated with them or not? What are they saying to you now?
Right. It's very frustrating because the only reason why I speak up is because I hope to change their minds and I hope to make them take the path that I took. But what I learned when I debated with my friends is that they're obstinate about their beliefs. They don't want to see otherwise. Like, we show them history. You show them, where the name Palestine come from. They just study history, and they still won't change their minds. And I can't explain it. There's psychological phenomena going on, and they think that I'm being paid, that I'm being, used by the Zionist people or whatever, and like I'm broke as crap, and I did not get paid, and you know, I do this because it changed my life, and I think I recovered my moral honesty in Israel, to be able to see, like, that experience allowed me to see things differently in all areas of my life and my political views too. I speak too much, go ahead.
Well, look, I mean, in short, it's because my Muslim faith, my faith has taught me to always speak the truth even when it's unpopular. And that's what it was always for me, is because I've always had a vested interest in peace. And that's why when I had that interaction with that former soldier, I didn't just, you know, ignore it and brush it off. Like, I wanted to know more. I wanted to educate myself. And that's why I speak up, because I know, like, what it's like to be in that mentality. You know, I know what it's like to always feel that, you know, that there's this big, bad, you know, country out there, and it's you know, it's going against your sense of beliefs. You know, it's going against your sense of justice. And be filled with so much hate, you know, and hatred for people that that you've never met, that you just see it on websites like AJ Plus, you know, and that's what it is for me. And that's why I'm not afraid to speak out, because I don't believe that what I'm saying is irrational. What I'm saying is that we should all be vested in peace, no matter how it comes. Like, we should all be vested in the idea of coexistence. And if that's too controversial, then I'm okay with being controversial. Then it shouldn't be controversial. And that's
Thank you. I'm going to ask that you guys, if one of the speakers asks a question, of course you guys can follow up with another question if you have another question for another speaker.
Hi, this will be a bit of a long one for all four of you. Well, of course it's going to be all four of you. How important do you think it is to refute the argument that Jews are just a religion, are interlopers from all over the world? And you know, because I think that's like the linchpin of anti-Zionism itself. The idea that we are not native to the region, that we don't belong there, that we're indigenous to. And this reminds me of that point, that like before this whole thing where people were calling us, you know, Europeans in Israel, when we were actually in Europe, they were telling us go back to Palestine. They were telling us go back to Asia, back to, you know, Israel. So I wanted to know what you thought of, you know, right, of the indigenous argument.
So I'm going to ask you to pick one of the speakers to answer that, or one of you.
I can.
So,
this was something I handled very early, and I was surprised to know, because that's what it was always argued that it was essentially a theological construct that the state of Israel was. And of course that is, I mean, there is every layer of evidence there is to confirm that the Jewish people are a people. There is, you know, archaeological evidence, documentary evidence, numismatic evidence. The Jews are probably the best documented people in the history of mankind. In his book, Paul Johnson is a British historian, and he wrote a great book called The History of the American People. Another one is The History of the Jews, and the beginning sentence of the first chapter says that the Jews are the most tenacious people in human history, and Hebron is there to prove it. And it's true. Now there is also genetic evidence. I mean, it is very easy for people to find out how much of their ancestry or heritage is Jewish. But it is a very widespread and common misconception that the Jews are the adherents of a religion. The best argument, the best way to explain or to show that that is not the case is to say, if you say, I have a Muslim atheist friend, people say, what the heck are you talking about? Or a Muslim or a Christian atheist friend, right? There's a contradiction in terms. But if you say, I have Jewish atheist friends, it's very understandable. I have dozens of them. And nobody feels that this is a contradiction because you are referring to a people, not to a group of adherents of religion.
So I have multiple questions, but I'll stick to one. So one of the main underlying ideas that seem to persist through all anti-Israel sentiments on campus, Jews, non-Jews, people have experienced Israel and haven't experienced Israel, seems to be that a lot of the facts that are spewed in sound bites, in their events, during Israel Apartheid Week, seem to be, in general, true, but without context. So I find that exists in so much of what they say. So my question is really, how do you think you can combat sound bites to the uninformed ear, and find a way to provide that context almost so that you don't have to get into a massive conversation with somebody to really allow them to not fall subject to those sound bites that seem accurate but lack context?
Is there a specific person you like to ask this question?
Preferably somebody who has experienced the campus.
Maybe Razwan or Sebastian?
I'll take it. So yeah, I mean that is one of the problems that we face whenever we're having this conversation. Is someone will say my so and so got shot by the IDF, and that proves that IDF are all terrorists. Or so here's one that I can use a specific example. So this person that I was having a conversation with, he was telling me that, and this was during the whole controversy with the metal detectors, and there was a lot of fighting going on, and he was showing me a video of this person who's bleeding out, and they're the people they're carrying him out to hospital, and the way they phrased it was look, the Israeli government won't even let him get treatment. This person's bleeding out, and this proves that Israel is evil. So I was like, okay, so when did this happen? And they're like, this happened during the metal, the riot that happened. I'm like, okay, but what caused this person to get shot in the first place? I was like, well, I don't know, because the Israelis are evil. I'm like, no, that doesn't make sense. There's always a cause and effect. So I did further research on this. This person was actually getting treatment by a hospital in Jerusalem, and his friends came in, took him out of the bed where he was getting treatment, and took him out. And the video only showed them by the gate, by the hospital door. So and if you look at it and you have no context whatsoever, then and you don't have any underlying. Okay, so if you have no underlying information of what's going on, then you're going to believe whatever they're saying. So I guess my answer to you is always ask follow-up questions, and don't phrase your questions as yes or no. Because if you give them a yes or no, you're giving them an easy way out. Always ask them questions where they have to provide context, and that's where you can sort of weed out the truth. Because if they're not giving you full answer or definitive answer or any answer with proper context, then they know that they're just regurgitating whatever AJ Plus tells them.
It's always good to point out. I mean, it's in the way when you're doing a testimony or a deposition in court, we say to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And the second part of it is often the most important, because most lying is lying by omission. Right? You say one part of it and you purposely delete a significant part of the truth, giving a completely false impression. Really, there is no simple formula to counter this. Lies will always be easier to spread and say than the truth. So the best way to address that is to challenge them, to challenge them to continue the dialogue. That it's always hard work. Someone will yell a calumny or a lie, and half the people will, and then we could spend the next 6 years trying to clean it up or to inform the people about it. So the good thing is that really is to know that, for me at least, because I've spent decades now studying the history of the conflict, is to know that historical facts, I won't say this, the truth is on our side, but the historical facts buttress the moral case for Israel.
Before I take the next question, I'd like to say that I've been here for 2 years, and after 2 years of doing countless events, this is the first time that members of SJP and JVP finally stayed for our events and are engaging. So I'd like to give them a round of applause for that. Specifically, the person asking the question, me and her had a really great and respectful conversation yesterday. Although we disagreed on several points, we were able to speak as human beings and individuals on campus. And please ask your question.
Thank you for that lovely introduction.
Love you too.
Okay, so my question is for Sebastian. So you talked about how singling out Israel is anti-Semitic, but I want to ask, I don't think that it's students in SJP or members of JVP who are singling out Israel, especially when U.S. foreign military aid, there's about $3.1 billion going to Israel, and 75% of U.S.'s foreign military aid is going to 2 countries, Israel and Egypt. And so I don't think that the exceptionality of Israel and the amount of money that is going towards their military and by extension the occupation is us, but it's actually an issue for all of us as American taxpayers, not even as Zionists or Jews or whatever. So I'm wondering how you can make that claim that it is particularly anti-Semitic when it is, an exceptional, it's receiving an exceptional amount of money from the American government.
Right. Well, thank you. I think that when we study, and I'm not an expert in this, maybe somebody else can say it, the United States benefits a whole lot from this relationship that we have with Israel. Israel's fighting terrorism at the front lines. Israel is less than 1% of the whole Middle East. There's like 20 Arab countries around them who are ready to destroy Israel and who have tried to destroy Israel many times. There's ISIS, there's Boko Haram, there's Al-Qaeda, there's all these terrorist groups, and Israel is there. And Israel has an amazing intelligence operation, and they share that with us. Our president is silly, and he reveals those secrets when Israel shares those secrets with us, but that's another point. So we benefit a lot from that. I think there's a huge percentage of that money that's actually invested in America. I think that the conversation then will go into the military-industrial complex, right? How much money as a whole in the world we invest in money, in arms, in war, and there's a theory in politics that that's what keeps us in peace. Because when both countries know that they can destroy each other, that's what keeps us in peace. And we have experienced that in the country. I think that to focus on Israel, it is anti-Semitic, because unless you start a group against American foreign aid, then that would not be anti-Semitic. Because like I said, Colombia gets $500 million from the United States every year, and it's grossly misused. It's, like I said, it's used to kill innocent farmers. It's used for super corrupt, come on, it's not America, super corrupt. And nobody cares about that. Nobody is singling out Colombia for being corrupt, for misusing our tax dollars. Right now, the peace deal is the following. The terrorists are going to give up the weapons. America is going to give them a salary. So instead of fighting in the jungle, they're going to get a salary
from our tax dollars. So your tax dollars are going to pay terrorists to not fight. We need to start a group against, American investment in Colombia or whatever. So I do think it's anti-Semitic because it's disproportionate and single out this only particular. And I know it's a lot of money, but I guess somebody else can speak about what that, I think right now, the Iron Dome, the system that Israel developed to protect themselves, is going to be used in New York, right? To protect something here.
Yeah, they did already.
Right, they did. So look, we're benefiting. This city that has been, has experienced terrorism now is benefiting from this relationship that we have with Israel because of that.
Yeah. So yes, I would say the first I want to say that the U.S. aid to the PA, to the Palestinian Authority, is larger per capita than it is to Israel. That's one. That is true. You could check it. It's on the State Department website. Second is precisely what he said, that this is an excellent bargain for the United States. It's not a handout. It's not, we get a great deal back from this, much more than with any other country that we pay to. And third, it goes to the double standard thing, which is part of the 3Ds that objectively will tell you if an action or a group is anti-Semitic or not, which is Sharansky's 3Ds, which is demonization, delegitimation, and double standards. The double standard part is key. You mentioned that Egypt is the second biggest recipient. There are no groups pointing out the massive human rights violations in Egypt, both against Egyptian citizens, against the Copts in Egypt. Egypt just recently, by fiat, created a ribbon, buffer zone, 1.5 miles wide, and eliminated entire communities along the Rafah border, the Sinai, for purely security reasons. Nobody ever protested that. There is no students for justice in Egypt anywhere in U.S. campuses. It is clear from anyone surveying the anti-Israel activities worldwide that Israel is targeted, is pointedly targeted for condemnation and bad press, and that double standard is the telltale sign that we are talking about an anti-Semitic coalition against the only Jewish state.
I'd like to ask follow-up questions if you have one. I know you raise your hand, and then we'll move on to the next question.
Yeah, quick follow-up. So you're saying that you think that there should be a movement that then targets American foreign aid, but that is actually built into the BDS movement, the sanctions piece. And so, I mean, like that movement does exist.
Against all foreign aid?
No, I mean, but what I'm saying is, like, if you're asking for a campaign that targets American foreign aid, like, that campaign does exist. And, like, yes, it's about Israel, but also, I mean, I'm a Jewish student in this movement. I would hope that you don't think I'm anti-Semitic for being a part of this movement. Because
you can be. It's easy. It's very being a Jew. First, I want to say that anti-Semitism is not necessarily a subjective phenomenon. You can have, for example, the current United Nations Human Rights Commission, which keeps targeting Israel in absurd ways. Like they're currently discussing the position of women in Israel, and there's Pakistani delegates on there, things like that. If that commission was made up of all of rabbis, it will still be, its actions will be anti-Semitic because there are objective definitions of anti-Semitism that do not involve personal hatred of Jews in general. So you can, it is how you treat a group of people, how you treat another person that matters. In the civil rights movement here in the United States, there were whites, Southern whites, who professed great love for their black friends or workers, but who said they believed they didn't want to mix with them. See, there was no hatred, no overt hatred of blacks in their hearts, and you have to take them at their, at their word. But they said, we believe that there are different people, and we don't want to have them in our community, we don't want to have them in our school. That is an objective expression of racism that is not accompanied by a subjective feeling of racism.
Okay, but that's assuming that the root of this activism is coming out of the fact that it is a Jewish state. Well, I think that it is in fact coming out of the fact that it is a colonial power that is one of the most consistent human rights violators that exists in the world today.
Okay.
So I'm gonna leave it at that. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Well, I would like to answer real quick something that touched, because I used to say that a lot. Israel's a colonial power. People say it all the time. And then I learned in 1492, in March, the Jews were kicked out of Spain by the Catholic kings of that, right? They kicked out the Jews, and the Jews had to go somewhere else. In October that year, Christopher Columbus came and conquered our lands. He was a colonialist. He came to our foreign lands, stole our resources, our people, and took them back to Spain. Colonialism needs to have a mother nation or something that you're taking away from a country and going back. The Israelis are not doing that. They're simply subduing their own land. They're taking back the homeland that righteously belonged to them because of the history in the land that no other nation or people has any claim. You can say that Palestinians, what we call Palestinians now, the concept of Palestinian nationhood is like 70 years old probably, because these are people, Syrians, these are Egyptians, these are Lebanese, these are people who eventually started calling themselves Palestinians. They don't have the history that the Jewish people have there. So Jewish people cannot be colonialists in their homeland. This is where they're originating from.
I don't think I need a mic, but I'll take one if you want me to. Sure. Hey, this is a question for A.B. Hawk, right?
Dave.
Okay, sure. Oftentimes, when I'm having conversations with people, specifically about historical fact, what we disagree on tends to be more about meta-historical interpretation rather than fact itself. So, for example, on the issue of people being, let's say, displaced before the outbreak of 1948 war, or 1947, whatever it is, people will say, well, Jews came, bought land, and Arab, farmers were then moved off the land because they were bought from absentee landowners. And even though there's a contract there, that's still displacement because the people that generally I differ with have, without using the label too broadly, Marxist philosophical commitments. Those are commitments I don't share. So I guess my question for you, and maybe it's a little bit philosophical for this event, but how do you reason and discuss with people that have different underlying philosophical commitments and then makes them interpret the same facts and assign different value judgments on those same facts?
I would say that I don't buy into the that all narratives are equal. That it's I believe there are historical facts, and if you have shared set of values, and what I mean by values are irreducible, a priori values, like life and liberty, and that life is better than death. I'm not talking about policies. Then you should reach the same conclusions. One very telling historical event that kind of shows what really happened in 1948. And first, I have lots of anecdotal evidence. I have, because of my family, I asked aunts and uncles and neighbors and all that, were you expelled? And they all uniformly said no. But that's not, you can't use my anecdotal evidence with your friends. But you can look at, for example, 1967. In 1967, there are no Arab claims of displacement or of expulsion. Not the PLO did not make them. The Arab League did not make them. No one has said Israeli soldiers came and kicked Arabs out of their villages. Yeah? Not even the Arabs are making that claim. Yet 375,000 Arabs left the West Bank in 1967, right? They had different reasons. Where some Hebron Arabs fled because they feared Jewish revenge for all the massacres that they, the Hebron Arabs, had done to the Jews in previous decades, in 1929 and before that, by the way. Hebron had suffered since the 15th century. Successive generations of Jews were expelled or murdered in Hebron. And the effort continues today, by the way. The only difference today is that the Jews are not helpless. Yeah? That's what's happening in Hebron today. It's a continuation of centuries-long attempt to make Hebron Jew-free, the oldest Jewish city in the world. Right? So, 1967 is a very, very instructive instance of Arabs leaving for various reasons, because they did not want to live under the Jews. I think is the main reason. They did not want to live under the Jews. And they didn't believe in coexistence. And they left also because they feared that they were going to be hurt in conflict, which is a common fear that different populations have in any area of war, in any conflict. So, were Arabs expelled? In certain instances in 1948 they were. We know that in Lud and Ramla they were, because of military operations, because they were sniping from the back, and because the Jewish position was really, really delicate and fragile, that they cleared certain areas. But that has been the exception. Had the Haganah, had the Jewish forces in 1948 wanted to actually clean mandatory Palestine from Arabs, they would have done it very easily. But we know that they have not, and they allowed 29,000 to return to their homes. This is a very little known fact, that after they had left certain cities, they allowed them to come back. In certain instances in Haifa, they begged the Arabs to stay. An Arab flight began long before the hostilities began. It is estimated that entirely half of the 600 to 750,000 Arabs left before May 15, 1948, before the Declaration of the State. The flight began in the previous year. One of the best books on this, best documented, original material, original sources, not copies from like-minded historians, is by an Israeli professor, Israeli-born. He taught at King's College in London. His name is Ephraim Karsh. The book is called Palestine Betrayed. About a third of the volume of the book are citations of first-time, declassified information, diplomatic cables, intelligence reports from the fields, British military reports, British mandatory reports. It is an amazing book. We just obtained, I work with an institution called the Center for Israel Studies in Amman, Jordan. It is a pioneering institute, the very first such place in an Arab capital. And we have obtained permission from both Professor Karsh and from Yale University Press to begin translating the book in Arabic. And because I think many Arabs feel that they are, we say in Arabic, they're ashab haq, yeah? That they have a legitimate grievance. And that legitimate grievance, in their eyes, or in my opinion, as I have discovered, is based on false historical narrative. It is just simply not supported by the facts. If you look at the facts, you will find that the Arab Nakba, the Arab catastrophe in mandatory Palestine in 1948, was the result of an Arab attempt to exterminate the Yishuv. Just like the German catastrophe in 1945 was the result of a German attempt to conquer and subdue and subjugate the peoples of Europe. So the Germans suffered in 1948, just like the Japanese suffered in 1945. But that suffering was the cause of the aggressive actions of the regime and the backing that they received from their populations.
There, and then we have Samantha.
Hello, I just have a quick question. It's your opinion about the current Israeli settlements and what your opinion is on how Israel has violated multiple international laws.
Is that for me?
Is there a specific person?
Okay. I just came back from staying at an Israeli so-called settlement, which is a community in Shomron. I just visited Israel and Jordan, and I stayed at a place called Habracha. I find the designation, really puzzling at first, because these are Jews in Judea. So it would be as strange to kind of speak about Russian settlements in Russia or Japanese settlements in Japan. There is the law governing the situation in the West Bank currently is not anything that the United Nations or The Hague says, but a treaty signed in 1994 between the Palestinian Authority and the State of Israel. And it divides that area into three sections: Area A, Area B, and Area C. In Area A and B, the Palestinians have full administrative authority, and in Area C, Israel has full administrative and security authority. There are no items in that treaty that says the Palestinians cannot build in areas A and B, or that the Israelis cannot build in Area C. So that's, from engineering beyond the cases like the illegal occupation, there is really no substance to the claim that what is happening in the West Bank is illegal. What you hear is it's not legality. It is politics that is causing such accusations against Israel.
Hi. Oh, okay. Oh, there we go. Okay, so I kind of have a two-part question. I wrote it down so I can make sure that it's as concise as possible. Well, it's whoever feels obligated for each part. A lot of progressive people's arguments nowadays are that, especially with the current government in Israel, Israel has become almost a conservative issue, and that's why Republicans tend to side more with Israel than Democrats in American politics, and why leftists on campus, particularly this campus, tend towards anti-Zionism. So my first question is, how can we combat that and show that Israel is a progressive issue, is a human and Jewish rights and Zionist rights issue, and still maintain this idea that you can be a Zionist and an intersectional person, an intersectional feminist. This is coming from someone who believes that she is quite liberal, not a leftist, but yeah. and it's been difficult.
So look, I think the best case to be made for Israel is the liberal case for Israel. And I'm a pretty diehard liberal. And look, the way I see it is that look, the facts are that everyone in Israel has equal rights. You know, LGBT rights in Israel. That's a thing that is such a foreign concept everywhere else in the Middle East. We have women who have been driving in Israel long before Saudi Arabia finally allowed that to happen. We've had a woman leader in Israel that America still hasn't had. So these are actual facts. And that is why, for me personally, it's so easy for me to support Israel because I'm a liberal. I'm a diehard liberal, and Israel aligns with my liberal values. And to answer your question, yeah, it is a problem that we are facing today. But as some I can't speak for your campus or anything like that. But it's a problem that we see with leftists, and that's why I always try to distinguish between leftists and liberals, because there is a big difference between the two. Leftists have a certain point of view that they don't want to give up. That starts with there's a historical concept to it with communism and everything. And my aim is not to convince leftists. My aim is to educate liberals, and that's how I go about it.
I just want to add to that real quick. To me, this is crazy puzzling because when you see the Middle East as a whole, you see women who could not drive in Saudi Arabia until last week. Women in Saudi Arabia cannot go in public without a man or her father or brother with her. They cannot go abroad, study abroad without her brother or her father with them. Gay people, members of the LGBTQ community as a whole, are being thrown off canes in Iran, in Iraq. They're being hung. In Qatar is legally against the law and punishable by death to be a homosexual in Qatar. The same people who sponsor AJ Plus and put videos about the LGBTQ community. When LGBT marriage equality passed in America, AJ Plus put a video congratulating gay people and stuff like that. There are people who own that outlet are the ones who are killing people for being gay in Qatar. And the royal family in Qatar owns Al Jazeera Plus, and they're the ones pushing this agenda. It's a propaganda machine. So I don't understand how liberals, who I used to be part of that group too, who choose this side like Linda Sarsour, like a liberal icon who just not a real feminist in many ways, who do not support the human rights of women in the Arab world, and it's just puzzling to me. I don't get it.
By the way, Linda Sarsour is not liberal; she's leftist.
Okay, so
yeah, it's a big.
No.
We don't want
disowned.
Yeah.
We don't want her in the left.
All right, we're gonna wrap it up. Thank you so much for coming. Before the last round of applause.
Oh, we're gonna night it.
So for those who don't know, Jews also are from the Middle East. And in fact, a lot of Jews who wear kippot, which is head covering, it actually originates from something called sudra. And it's written in our history that we used to wrap our heads as well with the sudra. I actually have a picture of my great-great-grandfather in Morocco with the sudra. And so each ethnic Middle Eastern people have their own symbols. So you have the Kurdish with the red, yellow, and green one. You have Druzim with an all-white one. You have Bedouin with the red and white one. And so we also have one with blue and white with Magen David that says our very famous and immortal saying, Am Yisrael Chai. And so we would like to give each of you a sudra for you for coming tonight.
Thank you so much. And I want to thank Rudy and everybody at SSI for doing this. You guys are very brave. I was very scared to come here because of what I've seen on the videos and stuff. But you guys are true, modern activists in the front fight of these events. And I want to thank you guys for coming here. It's late. Thank you so much for coming to listen to us. And please keep doing what you're doing. Thank you so much.